I want to preface this video by saying that I am not a fanboy of any fighter. In my opinion, fanboyism stems from an intense emotional attachment that often makes a person border on delusion and denial. That is the antithesis to what this channel strives to present. I'm only interested in objective boxing discussion, and objectivity is all I'll ever put forth. Now that I've said that, I want to get into the topic of this video. So in the wake of the announcement that Joshua will fight Oleksandr Usyk, many people have given their opinion on how that fight goes. But regardless of whether Joshua wins, loses or draws with Usyk, he is due a massive amount of respect from the boxing public. And the reason why is because Joshua has proven time and time again that he's willing to fight the best. His record and achievements compound this fact. Now, don't get me wrong, there are many technical, performance-based criticisms that people leverage towards Joshua, most of which are pretty much valid and warranted. But to claim that Joshua is some kind of illegitimate champion is extremely dishonest. When you assess Joshua's top-level wins, it really isn't anything short of remarkable what he's done in such a short space of time. If we rewind a few years, in 2015, Joshua knocked out Dillian Whyte in 7 rounds. Now, many Joshua detractors claim that Whyte was green in some kind of bid to discredit Joshua's victory. But in doing so, they completely disregard that Joshua himself was inexperienced, which made the fight a lot more of an even matchup than people are willing to recognize. And just a side note, in the lead up to this fight, many people were talking about it. Boxing fans and non-boxing fans, everyone was talking about this fight. And people were naturally asking me who I thought was going to win. And I saw this fight as a legitimate 50-50 fight, to the point where I couldn't pick. I didn't put a name forward. I just sat back and enjoyed it. But then a few months later, in April of 2016, Joshua beat Charles Martin to win the IBF title. Joshua then defended it twice. His first defense was against Dominic Breazeale, who's a fairly capable heavyweight contender. He stopped him in 7 rounds and then went on to stop Eric Molina in 3 rounds in December of that year. And it should be noted that even though Eric Molina probably isn't the best win, the best name to have on a resume, 18 months prior, he actually gave Deontay Wilder a tough fight. If you watch that fight, he hurt Wilder on numerous occasions. And so Joshua has now been a professional for 3.5 years. He's now 18-0 with 2 title defenses, and he unifies the IBF and WBA belts when he stops an all-time great heavyweight in Vladimir Klitschko in a great heavyweight fight. But Joshua detractors will also seek to discredit this win by claiming that Tyson Fury had beat Klitschko prior to Joshua, and of course that means that Klitschko is a lesser fighter because of that in their minds. But they don't recognize that when Tyson Fury fought Klitschko, that was in his 25th fight, and he had 7 years experience as a professional boxer, compared to Joshua having 18 fights and only 3.5 years as a professional. But 6 months later, Joshua was scheduled to fight Kubrat Pulev, but Pulev withdrew from the fight at late notice, and Carlos Takam stepped in. And he stopped Carlos Takam. For the record, I disagreed with the stoppage in that fight. I felt like Joshua had done well to come through the adversity in that fight. He was head-butted by Takam. Maybe it looked intentional in my opinion, but nevertheless he had a busted up nose and he was kind of overweight in that fight and was struggling to pin Carlos Takam down. But he started to gain control, started to land some good shots. He even knocked Takam down, I think, in the 3rd round. I don't agree with the stoppage though. I think Joshua deserves credit for the way he approached the fight, and he kept going, he was patient, he was chipping away. But the stoppage, no, I don't agree with that stoppage. But Takam only had 3 defeats at the time. Noticeably, he had a stoppage defeat to Alexander Povetkin, but also a close unanimous decision defeat to Joseph Parker. Speaking of Joseph Parker, he became WBO champion on the same night that Joshua defeated Eric Molina. And then in March 2018, Joshua unified the IBF, WBA and WBO belts by winning a pretty much comprehensive unanimous decision against Parker, who was undefeated at the time. Then a further 6 months later, Joshua stopped revered Russian amateur and experienced professional Oleksandr Povetkin in 7 rounds. And now many people don't understand how highly regarded fighters like Oleksandr Povetkin are in Russia, because Russian amateur boxing is really, if you achieve well in Russian amateur boxing, you're like a demigod. You're up there in terms of social status. So yeah, and Povetkin's a good fighter. He is a legitimate great fighter. And just on that note, this was actually a prediction that I got spot on. You know, just give myself a pat on the back. I predicted that AJ would stop Povetkin in round 7, and it happened. So yeah, toot my home with that one. But Joshua's next victory wouldn't come until December of 2019. And this is when he avenged his first professional loss to Andy Ruiz. And this was just 6 months after being decisively stopped and battered by Ruiz. And then, of course, a year later, in December of 2020, Joshua knocked out Kubrat Pulev, who had only lost to Vladimir Klitschko, and that was back in 2014. And now, this form is impressive, as it is in isolation, but it's made to look even better when you compare it to the records of Joshua's closest rivals, who are, of course, Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. Deontay Wilder has 4 fights against top-level opposition. He has 2 knockout victories over Luis Ortiz, a draw with Tyson Fury, and a stoppage loss to Tyson Fury. But it should be noted that to refer to Luis Ortiz as top level is really quite generous when you consider that he only had 1 notable win, which was a knockout of Brian Jennings, and that was 2.5 years prior to the Wilder fight. Other than that, Luis Ortiz had done nothing of note other than test positive a couple of times for PEDs. Tyson Fury, on the other hand, he has 3 top-level victories of note, or top-level fights of note, rather. His 2015 fight with the then unified champion Vladimir Klitschko, comprehensive points victory, credit to Tyson Fury. A draw with Deontay Wilder, and then a stoppage victory over Wilder. Now, Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder have both proven themselves to be very talented fighters, but they are yet to show the same form that Joshua has. Now, do Wilder and Fury both beat Joshua? I don't know. Who knows? We just have to cross that bridge when we come to it. But I'd maintain that it's largely irrelevant at this moment in time, because we are just objectively assessing the records of these 3 fighters. And when doing so, there's only one that truly stands out. And of course, now we're officially in the lead up to Joshua's showdown with Oleksandr Usyk, who is the former undisputed cruiserweight champion, but also widely recognized as the 2nd best cruiserweight of all time behind Evander Holyfield. By fighting Usyk, Joshua once again shows that he's willing to fight the best available opposition. And this video essentially comes... The reason for this video is the following. Many people are picking Usyk to beat Joshua, which I understand. It's a competitive fight, on paper at least. I'm not making a prediction, but I understand why people would pick Usyk to beat Joshua. But if Joshua beats Usyk instead, then you cannot withhold that credit. And just once again, this is a purely objective assessment of the achievements of Anthony Joshua. And I just implore the boxing public, especially your hardcore fans, to be critical and be objective and give credit where credit is due. At the end of the day, there's fanboyism, just this tribalism, this irrational support of fighters and everything they do it's weird. It's just deranged. As I say, it's delusion. And it just takes away from the enjoyment of the sport having to deal with idiots like this. So I'd encourage you to just be objective. Don't have these emotional ties to fighters, sometimes even promoters as well, which is even worse. Just enjoy the fights while they're here, because at the end of the day, people are going to lose. Fighters are going to lose. They're human. They're not infallible. Mayweather really did leave a really bad mark behind when he left, because he really put the emphasis on being undefeated. And don't get me wrong, it has a nice ring to it, and it's certainly an achievement in itself, but it's not the be all and end all. Just because you lose, it doesn't define you. It doesn't mean you're a bad fighter. If anything, it proves that, in this case, especially with current heavyweight division, it just shows that you're in a stacked and competitive era, which, if you can be the standout in a stacked division, in a competitive era, that just, it further consolidates your greatness, rather than, oh, I'm undefeated. Yeah, you probably maintain that undefeated record if you fight a low level of opposition, or inconsistently fight the best fighters that are around. So at the end of the day, these fighters are they're gonna swap wins and losses with each other. You see that in the current state of the division. Joshua had a comfortable unanimous decision over Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker had a close majority decision, I think, over Andy Ruiz. Andy Ruiz stopped Joshua, constantly chopping and changing and exchanging wins and losses. And that's the sign of a stacked and entertaining division. So enjoy it while it's here, because it won't last forever. These guys are going to have to retire sooner or later. And who knows, we might go back to the Klitschko era, where heavyweights were just doormen. No disrespect to anyone, but they weren't good. And that was one of the criticisms that people leveraged against Klitschko, was, yeah, he was immensely talented, but he was fighting these hopeless guys, these guys who didn't have a chance. They were competitive amongst each other, but when it came to Klitschko, who was top dog, they weren't even close. So it's an asterisk next to all his achievements. But yeah, that's my take on this. If you guys want to discuss this, just drop me a comment in the comments section, and I'll get back to you. If you like my take on this, if you agree, why not give me a thumbs up? If you're some kind of deluded fanboy, give me a thumbs down, or if you just disagree with what I say, that's fine as well. And if you enjoy the content, why not subscribe? Thanks for listening, guys, and I'll catch you on the next video.